What's up, Greg?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you a little bit of a delay, but maybe I think it'll catch up to us.
Okay.
We'll try to do one thing here. We're just waiting for Matt to pop in. I see him there.
I see something there.
I did get a cold though, like a chest cough.
You there, Matt?
I'm here, baby. I am just getting my coffee. Sorry.
There you go.
Got my little Hampton coffee cup.
Matt, are you in the conference room or are you at home?
Do you remember when you were here and me and Scott sat down in that little foyer area?
Yeah.
This is two little offices right next to that. They're just little private offices. They're barely big enough for one person.
Gotcha. Well, let's kick it off today, gents. Welcome to This Week in Lumber again with Greg Riley, Sitka USA, Matt Beamer, Hampton Lumber Sales. I think what did we take, about a 2-week hiatus about?
I think so. Yeah. Between spring break and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, so what I'm seeing is the weather's beautiful here, 75 out. And as we all know, the weather is never responsible for what goes in the market, but it's certainly something everybody likes to talk about. So there's a few things we can go over today. If you want to talk about lumber, a few things I had written down. Housing, spring weather. Again, we just went over that. Logistics has been silent. Trucks are about as cheap as I've ever seen them in the last 5 years. Haven't heard anything on rail cars. Basis and low grade versus high grade, something Greg and I talked about today when I was walking in, Matt, which I think you guys have talked about. MSR and spruce almost being as cheap as number 2 and better. And southern yellow pine kind of had a little bit of strength to it in the last few weeks. So especially in the 4-inch, kind of shows you how the offsite component people are doing. OSB is kind of sneaky strong, and other items seem to be kind of just hanging in there. So that's what I see. Where did you guys want to start off with things at, Greg, Matt?
Take it away, Matt.
Well, we could talk about the compression of low grade versus high grade. I mean, that's a good starting point.
Can we start, Matt, by talking about? Can we take everybody back to? I'm going to say it was what, 8, 10, 12 weeks ago, over that time period when we highlighted how incredibly cheap number 3 was and what an amazing basis trade it was. And, for our viewers out there that, that actually, say, wow, take our advice. Sometimes this is just one of those times when it actually worked out for them. So I wanted to, give kudos to those of people that did it.
So what we've seen in the last, since January, we had a $200 basis between number 3 and number 2. What you could buy cash number 3 and sell the board for as a hedge at that time. It was actually over $200. Let's just round number. Let's just use round numbers and say it was 200. As of right now today, that spread is about 20, based on what I'm selling cash number 3 for, versus what I'm paying for 2 and better, 2 before 2 and better, and what we're selling 2 before 2 and better for out of our spruce mills. So that's $180 compression in 3 months, in a quarter's time. And it's two things at the same time. One is, the places where number 3 is used the most have had good weather, and they're busier than the average, Portland market or Chicago market in terms of just due to weather. So the usage of low grade has been better than, seasonally better. At the same time, the price of 2 before 2 and better spruce is really just kind of collapsed on itself. It's gone from, maintaining a mid 400s level to now it's easily buyable in the mid, 330 to 350 range, depending on whatever towel you want to buy. And so we've seen another $100 collapse in the 2 and better price. Spruce 2 before 2 and better is the best value in the whole wide world right now, based on what I'm telling you. And, Hem-fir and Doug-fir prices, and Ashley, you talked about yellow pine. Those prices are leaning upwards, not downwards on narrows. I mean, I'm selling 2 before 2 and better Hem-fir at 400 mil easily.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, look at the overall. Jump back to you, Greg. The overall tempo, and Billy G said, "Good opening synopsis." Ashley, thanks, Bill. I'm never going to complain when somebody strokes the ego a little bit. It makes me feel really good. So
just to piggyback on what Matt's saying is that and he's absolutely right. At this point, we know that the low 300s FOB BC mill is a long-term unsustainable number. And I mean, it's the outlier with the rest of the market. Yeah, sure. The excess of European 2x4 16s all on the ports has put a lot of pressure on that. And maybe we'll segue into like what we think that's going to look like, 30, 60 days from now. But back to Matt's point is, the buy is you buy all the 2 and better 2x4 spruce that you're going to need for the next, 60, 90 days. And if you want to just take a small profit, you sell futures and lock yourself in $50. If you want to take a bigger profit than that, if you don't think $50 is enough, then you just buy it naked.
So, Greg, quick question for you then. First of all, since we're talking about how great of a job we do here, which we do, and prognosticating stuff, and I'm not exactly sure if it's just because we are that sharp, good looking, and intuitive. I'm supposed to,
or we're just blind squirrels,
or if the rest of the industry just gives us that much leeway between our experience and their inexperience. I'm not sure, but that's why we're here giving this information away free every week. The other thing I noticed was, let's go back to.
Do we not have any sponsors yet?
No.
We need to monetize. Come on.
Matter of fact, one mill, big public mill just told me they didn't want to be on our platform because they're afraid of the technology. If that helps. So. I sent them the link to Stephen Jobs back about 20 years ago, saying when the old sales and marketing guys take over a company, the results. So what I wanted to
know when I can program my Chat GPT to buy and sell lumber for me. That's or when I can get my little Furby, my Furby to do it.
Well, how do we know you're not a fake rendering of Greg Riley right now, and you're sitting kicking it on the beach, and this is just
you could just be Chat GPT.
The hologram.
You're like Max Headroom. So one thing I wanted to talk about, and I have this in an asterisk here. When you did that poll on LinkedIn 3 weeks ago, nobody, or like 14% or 12% said we were going back to the 300s.
What we highlighted was that January and March both expired in the 330s. January had a rally of $150 from there. March, the market rallied after January expiration, $150. March, the rally was closer to, I think, like $80 or $90. So we'll be interested to see what this one is.
But
can we talk about futures a little bit?
I love what you and Matt are talking about here. About there's relative value and there's absolute value. And if you look at 2x4s right now, there's a big difference when we were at $1,000 and there was basis on different things. And when you're at, cost of production, quote unquote, shutdown numbers, And one thing when I was walking to the train this morning, Greg, you highlighted was how inexpensive, I don't like to say cheap, 1650 MSR was. I mean, how inexpensive is it trading next to the 2 and better price? So let's talk about some real value here.
Actually,
Yeah,
didn't
and
you
it's one of those
living
things,
on that?
Ash, where a lot of times, I mean, I'm looking and I'm saying, okay, so we can see, low grade, with strength pushing up underneath the 2 and better price, the 2 and better price where we see as a value, and then, MSR trading, in a lot of cases close to or right on top of the 2 and better price, and at a pretty good discount to Southern Pine 2x4.
Yeah, good point. So we're used to make the switch trying to convince people to go from MSR to Southern Yellow Pine. Now you almost want to tell them to go from Southern Pine to MSR.
It's one of those things in the market that's making me, like I'm scratching my head and trying to go, okay. I mean, yeah, the easy answer is we look at our historical charts and we know that between now and the fall, MSR has relative strength to 2 and better. So intuitively, we would think that if we bought MSR at today's prices and we're able to hold it for any period of time, that would be a good thing to do.
So the good thing to do right now is call a mill, and that they usually have straight lengths of 14s and 16s in MSR, and counter them below the 2 and better price to see if you can get it.
Actually, that's what you did for 20 years, dude. In fact, when I first started talking to you, you were doing that. You were putting MSR on the ground out of Abitibi, back in the early 2000s. That was your game. You had a bunch of this stuff going on. So
when Ash decided to buy MSR, Matt, he'd buy more in a morning than the trading floor could sell in a month. I mean,
Greg
he's like the kind of guy you're like, hey, Ash, you want a chip? No, I'll eat the whole bag.
Hold on a second, puff my chest out here.
That's
hey, so
funny.
I was listening.
I just want to know, Ash. I remember when you bought, it was an obscene amount in Edwardsburg, Michigan. It was like, I don't know, like 200 trucks of 2x4 1650. And
that was the first batch. And what I learned from that
the
is
first batch worked out just fine. It was when we got in the second batch, we took the second bite of the apple. That's when you got into trouble.
Yeah, every time I go to a convention.
I think you sent Wisniewski over there to do some sorting for a couple of weeks.
We were all over there doing sorting. The rule I learned about that is being greedy and going back for the second kick at the cat, which was a big mistake, which I learned in my life. So I was listening to Elon Musk had one of the BBC reporters on yesterday, and started pressing the BBC reporter, and I'm going to kind of segue into this. So, Greg, can I ask you how much European spruce is sitting on the docks right now?
A lot.
So you are down in Florida. You went and visited Florida. You gave me an insight to what's sitting there, how long we potentially have stuff sitting there. What can you tell us about that?
I've never seen, so much lumber in one place. I mean, it was substantial, no question about it. And what I always look at when I look at lumber anywhere is, the key is, what is the outflow? And, based on the back of the envelope math, I mean, I determined that there was probably 3 months worth of inventory on the ground at the current shipping pace from the port. The one thing that's interesting is if you're calling around, northern ports have been getting, have less relative lumber and available, and are selling for higher prices than the southern ports. And I mean, I guess I think part of my explanation for that is they got filled up earlier and kind of throttled back, whereas some of the southern ports just kept taking it.
One caveat to that, Greg, unless they're the few people that only sell 5 people that sell cheaper than the rest of the people. then the case is it goes away and nobody really knows what it is.
Well, I mean, one of the things about trading in European lumber is there's a lot of different people that trade it, and there's there can be some pretty wide price ranges day to day in what that lumber trades at.
Yesterday I asked you a question, Greg, and I thought you had a great response to it. Matt, I was talking to
Is
Greg.
that different than my normal responses to you?
No, it was. Matt said I trade a lot of MSR, but really I learned a lot from Greg and I sitting together forever doing that. But I asked Greg, hey, I'm writing this article to go in a multifamily builder magazine that's going to CEOs and C-suite people that don't know how to buy lumber. Can you tell me the best times to buy lumber? And right after I said that, I'm like, oh, it was the dumbest thing to say, right? Greg's like, yeah, when you need it. And what was the other one, Greg?
Well, I mean, yeah, no, when's the best time to buy it? Yeah, when you need it. No, I mean, I think, Yash, you and I talked about it and, the seasonality of lumber, and historically over, our careers, and Matt, I'm sure you'll confer with this, is, hey, when's lumber the cheapest normally on average during the year? The fourth quarter. Right. So, typically, so seasonally, and so when you have a seasonal and a cyclical, low in the fourth quarter, that's a good time to buy, a fair amount of lumber. And I mean, the rest of the answer to the question was, yeah, it's like, I mean, when you need it. I mean, one of the challenges and one of the things that I guess, Matt, for you and I and Ash, it's been great about this business is, you have so many parts of the chain that are all trying to speculate on the price of lumber. And that's why things get so out of whack.
Yeah.
But, that getting out of whack is the opportunity.
It occurs to me that we're really at, multi-year lows on spruce in the second quarter of this year, right? Like right now, this is as cheap as spruce has been in a while, probably since 2020 when the pandemic started. And so that's unusual, right? And so why is that? Well, I think it's a combination of things. It's a combination of higher interest rates and the cost of borrowing money to carry inventory. And that puts pressure on big corporations to carry less inventory. And that means the mills have to carry more inventory. So, mills don't want to carry too much inventory. So they force lumber into the market. We've had a long, sloggy winter in the United States. It's just affected a wider range for a longer period of time than normal. And then you have the European issue where that takes some market share away. Also, I'm talking specifically about spruce. So, I think right now is a fantastic time to buy lumber. Personally, I mean, if you pay me to be a speculator and you pay me to take educated risk. And when I see things like spruce 2x4, 2 and better running into the number 3 price, and it's easily available to buy, and I can buy the tallies I want to buy, right? I can buy 12 and longer. I can buy straight 14s, straight 16s. I don't have to settle for a flat tally random, and I can get it shipped quick. Then, I compare that to $400 hemlock and, $440 Doug fir and whatever yellow pine's going for. And I think, wow, why wouldn't, when spruce is the cheapest species on planet Earth, and when number 3 and number 2 are coinciding with each other, it's just sort of a green light on number 2, really. So that'd be my answer. There's one other. You have the backstop of May futures being a $50 premium. Yeah, and I want to talk about futures because let's look at the May contract. Nobody wants to talk about the elephant in the room. There's 2,100 open interest in May. 2,100. Okay. Those contracts need to be settled by May 15th because there is no contract in July for them to roll into. There is no mechanism to go from the major 110,000 board foot contract into the mini. They can't do it without doing it the old-fashioned way, manually buying back an equivalent position. They can't roll it. And so who's short?
I know a guy that has some contracts, basis traded, I do know a guy.
I think the funds are short about 1,100 contracts right now, something like that. From what I'm hearing from the people that I trust in Chicago, they're telling me 11 to 1,200. The funds are short.
Yeah.
Well, they're not going to supply that wood. They don't own any sawmills. So where are they going to get 1,100, 1,200 buyers to cover their short position between now and the end of this month? This is a big problem. And, when everybody's short and the market's at a multi-year low and number 3 is bumping into number 2, I think buy.
And then Matt, I contrast that the new May contract is trading at 505 Chicago.
Yeah.
So that's equivalent to what? Well,
405,
405,
yeah.
Right?
Hey, back to another good to add to your point. This is just a guess, from my part. We just give our ideas here. They're not recommendations, but there's a couple big distributors out there that have VMI deals with these big mills that just ship them cars. And then everybody that I know that are smaller DCs complain that they're fighting against VMI wood that's priced every week. Well, what a great opportunity to buy a whole bunch of cars and have the market, if it does go up, those guys in the VMI have to follow it on the way up too, right? So a smart guy once told me you never want to sell below replacement cost, but at least you'll have a little bit more leverage there when you do that. Do you run into that, Matt, with guys who like they just, it seems to be the industry's gotten a lot more lazier as it's consolidated and people just want to do the easiest deals based on a print price to make it go away. There's not as much speculation out there, which leaves great opportunity for guys like you and Greg.
I just think there's more people that want to.
I don't know if that was a question or.
I know what you're saying. I think it's more like, let's use somebody else's money to run our business. And that's fine to a point, but that does breed complacency. And those deals don't always work out logistically, right? So, I mean, if you're doing a VMI in Florida and your lumber ships from British Columbia, that's a 5-6 week transit time. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in that 5 or 6 weeks. So, having a backup plan of inventory in Florida would be option B, would be a good one to have, right? Now, if your mill is in BC and your VMI is in Washington, no big deal. You can truck it across the border and get it there the next day. So part of it is just geography. But yeah, no, I do agree with your premise that the VMIs and the contracts tend to breed a little bit of a lackadaisical attitude at times, just like right now.
I had a couple questions for you, Matt. One is, we talked about home center takeaway, and you can kind of clearly see, the relative strength of 8-footers. That is saying that's obviously still good, and I wonder whether that is continuing from your viewpoint. And the other is, given the severity of the West Coast winter, how are those markets? Are those markets opening yet, or are they just starting? Is there more to come? I hear my wife did tell me that the wildflowers in California are spectacular.
California and Arizona have perked up here recently. Oregon and Washington are saturated. When I got done mowing my lawn last night, I had to take my shoes off and wring my socks out. There's nowhere for the water to go. The rivers are all brown and look like the Mississippi. So, it's rained every day basically for like 2 weeks. When I was on spring break over in Central Oregon, there was a foot of snow on the ground in late March. Now, there's been many times I've been over there in late March where it was like 65 degrees and you went golfing. So we're still in winter over here. It's really wet in the Northwest. That's not going to change anytime soon. But
how does that impact logging at this point?
Logging, this is what these guys do. We're not having trouble with logs. The only thing we're having trouble with on the West Coast is rail service. And we're not getting as many empty cars from the UP specifically as we've been ordering. And I know other mills in the area that have come to Hampton and asked us for help because, we try to help. But so that's been a problem, but that's a minor problem. We're talking like maybe a week of delays on shipments out of the West Coast here. So, but the West Coast business is kind of the dry Doug fir and the green Doug fir narrows have been pretty good recently. And just this last week or so, we're seeing a lot of orders from like Colorado and Arizona and Texas on Hem-Fir 2x4 and 2x6. And the 2x6 price is much higher. Like, I mean, so is the 2x4, but I mean, we sold some 2x6 Hem-Fir yesterday for almost 600 Chicago for some really fancy tally type stuff. I don't know. There's some good business out here in Hem-Fir and Doug Fir.
Yeah, I think
What
that's
is
the
Hem-Fir?
one thing
What is
that
Hem-Fir? What is Hem-Fir Florence trading at, Matt, to Chicago?
490 to 500 Chicago.
And where's the new contract trading at right now?
505.
Since you can deliver Hem-Fir into it on trucks, just a little.
Well, you could go buy some cash spruce at 445 Chicago and make $60, or 50 anyways if you want to.
Yeah, well, that would work out like that. You could drop that on the ground in Chicago and deliver into that contract, right? But you got to do it on 4 trucks. Is that right? Right, unless you EFP it.
It's carload delivery.
Yeah.
The contract is truckload sized.
Yeah. Okay. So, but wholesalers everybody in the chain can now deliver against that contract, right?
That's correct.
Which they could before, but it was a little harder. But now, so you're telling me that people could clip a $65 coupon if they wanted to?
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, no, out here in the West, it's basically still wet in the Northwest, but California and Arizona have dried out a little bit, and so their activity levels have perked up quite a bit. Green narrows, like Green Doug for 2x4 and 2x6 are up, $80 to $100 in the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's been. I don't like this term, so you overuse it. It's the market's been sneaky strong. I saw it in OSB the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I could sense some people in the market were short at these low numbers, and it just wasn't coming back to save anybody. And I've continued to see it through conversations with people on the phone how everything besides 2x4 spruce seems to have a little bit of activity in it, doesn't it? Just enough to keep you like leaning back a little bit.
It feels that way to me.
It's yeah, well, and I think one of the things is the expectations on business in the third and fourth quarter on what this year was going to be. Things continually are a little bit better than people thought. There's 2 other things I guess I'll highlight is, one is looking at the home builder stocks and, how they've recovered. They're still not back to their high, but they've certainly recovered. But one thing that I was looking at, which kind of really blew my mind, was Builders First Source, which is, really the only publicly traded, look at what a pro dealer looks like. Its stock is at a new all-time high.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great point. Great question for you. So there's a lot of multifamily people in all parts of the chain that watch this show. Some people that give their risk to other people and don't know what the price of lumber is. Some that watch it. There's a lot of large builders on here too. I see Jared from Minnesota is on here, and they generally give their lumber. People usually give their lumber spend to retail yards. Right now, when we're looking at being near break-even production costs on a lot of items outside of some Southern Yellow Pine items, but yet Southern Yellow Pine items are still relatively low based on the 2 years. What advice do you have for multifamily people to go to transfer their risk to the people that they normally transfer it to? How should they do that at these numbers? How much of a premium do you think they'll be in stuff? And what would your recommendation, if people have jobs sold right now, how far out would you have them lock it in and push this to their people that want to take the risk and give it to them at these numbers?
Well, we were talking about this, earlier, Ash, about where's the best time to buy. And right now, anything that's going to start between now and let's say July, August. The risk reward is there's no risk reward. That should be, that lumber should be being secured right now. The farther out you go right now, there is going to be a premium, just given
for sure.
At least from on my modeling, there's a premium. If I've got a futures market that's a $80 premium to the cash market, and the contract is the undervalued item, then there's going to be a premium. But that having been said, the sweet spot is anything to start between now and July, August. That number should be being secured right now, because the risk reward is that it's going to cost more to wait than less.
Well, let's go back to this big retail yard. Look at, somebody made a comment up here. 13-month down market has increased margin for BFS. Basically, they're always short in some way, so bear markets increase their margin. All these big retail, all these big retail yards went to 30 days. Builders should now go back out and push them to 90-day locks, and get them to do that. I mean, if you want to transfer risk to the big boys, this is probably the time to start doing it. And you find the one that wants to do it. That would make sense, right? I mean, otherwise you're wearing that risk.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No question about it.
I didn't get a lot of response from you guys on that one.
No, I said yeah.
Well, no, and you mean actually, because I'm thinking it through from the standpoint is that, both the builder yards and the builders have gotten comfortable with the 30-day lock and as a way to manage their business.
But if you want somebody to be difference maker in the market, will be the person that goes out there and starts giving these big builders 90-day locks again. That would take business, I would think.
Yeah, to the extent, my question is, do the big builders want that right now? I mean, given, we got some big builders. Do they want it? If they're on here, answer that question. If they want that certainty, if you have profit in it, if somebody came and gave you 90 days, would you take that instead of rolling the dice?
I bet they would. I mean, just from a numbers perspective, that would make sense, especially if you're talking about spruce.
Yeah.
Depends on the product mix for sure. Mm-hmm.
For sure. No doubt about that. No doubt about that. So speaking of, are other items outside of lumber freeing up at all? Because I know they're not on bathroom material. I know that market. I know that market is still at an all-time high.
Hey, one thing that we haven't talked about is the core inflation was down slightly, and so maybe that is positive for the builder segment. That might have something to do with why the stock prices are higher, and there's some forward-looking things here with interest rates that might benefit the home builder also. So who knows, if the Fed decides to take the gas pedal off, then that would be bullish for real estate, in the second half of the year. And I've had some big people, and we've had some big people on our show here in the last couple of months talk about the second half of the year from the real estate perspective in a positive way, better than the first half, right? I mean, I've heard that comment from realtors and people in the housing business multiple times from multiple different sources, including the guy that we mocked 3 weeks ago when I talked about the head of the NAHB. He was on Fox Business News or something. I saw him, we're really bullish on the second half of the year. Well, maybe they're bullish on the second half of the year because low cost of materials, easier supply, never been easier to get trucks lined up and all that stuff. There's new port capacity on the East Coast, right? I mean, we're having problems in Long Beach and Los Angeles. You guys hear about the sort of quiet strike that happened the other day?
No.
Where they just didn't show up for work for a day? Well, now the union guys are, they're the people that own the port in Los Angeles and Long Beach are now like, well, you know what? If you guys don't want to show up to work, we'll just move this capacity to Houston or East Coast ports. We don't need you anymore. So I think the port thing is a sticky situation, but I'm kind of babbling here. The bottom line is
you've gone down a rabbit hole there.
I'm going to get back on track.
Let me get you out.
All I think about when you say Port of Long Beach is the bad Lethal Weapon movies.
It's actually
so we'll have a bunch of housing stats. I'm thinking that next Wednesday is housing. It's either Wednesday or Thursday next week is housing starts for March. And then we'll have some home sales data coming up. So we'll get another month of data. But in the meantime, I think, buy what's cheap, sell what's expensive.
Is it look, everybody, thanks for showing up here. I think, we were patting ourselves on the back, but Matt, Greg, we really do a good job helping to educate the industry. And a buddy of mine called yesterday and said, hey, you should, promote materials exchange too. I mean, the way that we make money is people coming on and listing product in a new digital market. That's how we make our money, and why we can come here and show you the different mismatches in the market and our expertise on what we know. We're here to sell a service. What Greg does, what Matt does, what I do. So what we appreciate is you having more people show up to this show by telling them. We should have everything updated by the end of the week on our website of all the archived shows. You can go to YouTube and watch any of these also, but we'll clean that up a little bit better because a few people called me on that. But to me, if I was not doing this show, I would be watching this show, especially if I was sitting anywhere in the supply chain that relied on other people's information. I would use this to help build my talent stack and just learn a little bit more. And Matt and Greg take their time out of the day, which they're buying and selling lumber every day. So I appreciate everything you guys do also. So we'll look forward to doing this again.
Great to see you guys again. Ash, I'll see you back in Chicago soon.
All right,
Take
real
care,
good.
everybody. Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks.
See you
Bye.
guys.